So hello, everybody. Welcome to our Easy Talk for Common Good. This is our second part or second session, and I would like to welcome everybody who are interested in Common Good and also HRM. This is a session which actually supposed to be a very easy talk. It's not an academic talk, but it bridges basically academics, practitioners, students, and bring all together to discuss a very important topic, use or usefulness basically of HRM or the HR function in relation to the every common good topics. And common good topics related to well-being, the environmental sustainability, it relates to technology, it's also related to everything what can be influenced by collective mind. We will also come back to the definition of HRM or common good HRM, but before that, I would like just to say that I'm really delighted that we are continue this conversation. So because we would like actually to continue the conversation about the role of values on within the HRM function. And today our guest speakers are Jason Palframan and where is Susanne Rank, who were part of our conversation last time and who are specializing on introducing values or studying the values within the HRM, because last time when we met during this session, we identified that actually in order to implement any common good HRM practices, we need to require some understanding and common ground about values. And this is why we would like actually to dedicate this session to actually understanding why the values are actually important or maybe less important. To give a floor Jason and Susanne. Just to introduce Jason. Jason is a researcher in HRM in Department of Management and Technical University, Shannon, Ireland. Welcome, Jason. And Jason is also a very known associate lecturer at the Open University with the department.
We're colleagues, Olga, aren't we? So
exactly, we are colleagues. Nicola, Jason is also a colleague of us, so it's very welcome. And also Susanne, I'm really pleased because we know each other already from the last conference, and I'm really pleased to see you, because you are a very known professor in human resources management with a focus on sustainability in University of Mainz, and the Mainz Schule or school are very known in the area of the in the studying and developing of values. And this is really, I'm pleased that you join us at this conversation. I'm also welcome other international participants here, and also from Germany, particularly in Austria. And also we would like maybe to move on to this topic. Jason, Susanne, what do you think? Is it the answers resonate with your research and your view?
They do, actually. We'll cover that. We talk about it. So I have a couple of slides, if that's okay, just to navigate and to give a bit of structure. And just to say as well, that both myself and Susanne have got practitioner experience as well in HR. So I'm a chartered member of the CIPD as well. So I have that background. So Susanne has as well, with her change management background. So here we go. So can you all see the slides?
Yeah, but you need the presentation mode.
You see that?
Yes. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so thanks, Olga, and thanks to everybody for taking up your time for being here as well. So Just to give it some structure, we were asked by Olga to actually cover a number of questions, as you can see, and I've added the first one because that was a late question she asked. How are we defining Common Good HRM, basically? So we're going to have a look at that first, just to sort of give a bit of context as to what we're talking about. And then the core questions are why a Common Good HRM approach is important for HR practitioners. Of course, we're going to have a dialogue, myself and Susanne, about that question, the first main one. Then the second one is why values are important for HR practitioners. And then the next question then we have to ask is, or answer I should say, is how practically then can these values be embedded towards a Common Good HRM approach? So it seems to be loads of people coming into the room. They must have got the link late, I think. I don't know. So that fourth question there, of course, we're going to talk about our research in terms of a framework that we're going to offer in terms of how we believe values can be embedded towards this common good approach. So again, we've only have 35 minutes, so we're going to cover an example of recruit selection later to show you that. And a final area, Olga, that we didn't talk about, which I think is really important, is some reservations that we both have, myself and Susanne, in terms of some thinking critically about this approach in terms of issues of power around HR, for example, impact and all the rest of it. So we'll have a look at that if we have time towards the end. And of course, we have a Q&A at the end as well. Okay, so Susanne, do you want to come in at all at this stage?
Well, I just thank you, Olga, that you introduced myself. And just for the audience, we divided our roles a little bit. So Jason is in favor for the values. I'm coming in from the critical business perspective. So don't be surprised that I'm the critical one. This is just my role for today, that we have a lively dialogue. Yeah, and that's how we prepared ourselves. Okay.
So in other words, I'm the good cop and Susanne's the bad cop, and that's the way we set it up, a bit like a Morecambe and Wise show. So
perfect.
We'll see how it goes. So for those that don't know, because I know there's a couple in the audience that don't know, that basically, how do we define Common Good HRM? Well, it's a relational, multi-stakeholder approach to work and employment relations, characterized by a focus on maximum shareholder empowerment to achieve sustainability. So that's the more recent, up-to-date definition. And so what does it mean? Well, the core premise is that businesses have a relational responsibility to ensure well-being of all their stakeholders, including local community, broader socio-ecological system, with a particular focus on initiatives such as trying to meet the SDGs. But what's important is that this approach extends or goes beyond the earlier CSR frameworks by adopting a more holistic, objective approach. And it's about fostering human and organizational well-being through the advancement of societal, ecological, and economic prosperity. So that's the sort of premise, if you like. It's a bit of a mouthful, but that's the focus. But what we have is 4 sort of guiding principles, which again have also been evolved, updated in the last couple of years. And the first one is really important because you can see it takes an outside-in perspective on organizational purpose, with a broader focus on society and sustainable challenges. So that outside-in perspective, of course, goes beyond the traditional inside-out perspective of normal businesses. Business decisions then are made through a values lens that consider socio-ecological consequences. And then thirdly, the HR system is multi-stakeholder focused, but I think for us, or for me anyway, the human-centeredness is really important and provides opportunities for workplace democracy. In other words, things like voice, which is really important. And the final thing, of course, is that it aims to reduce employee harm and foster human potential to flourish, which is what our framework is really all about, I suppose, to try to foster that. So those are the guiding principles, and I know Susanne is dying to come in with a couple of comments.
Yeah, because from the business perspective, the CEO always will ask you as an HR manager, what are the benefits for the company? And so if you stick to the last bullet point, it's about the well-being and flourishing and the development of the individual. And then I know from my experience as the global company SAP that they ask, yeah, what on the organizational level are the benefits? And good to know that there are some studies now in place from Lu from 23 and 24, for example, that they have found out for this Common Good HRM effects on innovative behavior, or from Palm in a study in Vietnam, that there is also an influence on ethical behavior. So the research is going on and moving on. But what I would question is like not only a multi-stakeholder approach, so it's also a multi-level approach. So not only looking for the individual, the team level, the leadership level, and then on top the company or the operational level. This is one guiding question we will always tackle with each of the slides. And on the other hand, as you know, because a lot of young people are in the audience, you might ask, I have certain needs and any demands on my development. So my question also would be, how can we customize the Common Good approach to the needs of the employees? So some employees, they favor a more democratic approach, others they favor a more top-down approach. Yeah, so we have different people in companies with a low and high and low qualified profile. We have different ages and so different settings in life. And this, I think, is very important. What I learned from practice, that we really customize our HRM policies and concepts. So this is also very interesting later on to the debate that with you.
Yeah, that's a good question, Susanne. I think like one of the issues of our own framework, I think it's surmising a normative model which suggests best practices. But of course, I think from what you're saying is that maybe the contingency approach is really important, contextual, looking at certain needs within the organization. But I think overall those values obviously are very important to help people flourish. So yeah, no, good questions. So I'm going to move on to no problem. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So and this is our first main question that we were been tackling in the last couple of weeks, walking around thinking about it. And so why Common Good HRM approach? Why is it important for HR practitioners? Well, I've said here that we both said, sorry, that shifting focus then to the Common Good or SDGs, it moves HR practices from a profit-driven transactional type approach to a more holistic, ethical and sustainable framework. And to our mind, one of the reasons, or to my mind especially, is that this shift towards a more holistic, ethical and sustainable framework has the potential to create greater meaning to, I think, to the role of HR practitioners. And certainly for me, if I had my time back, say 10, 15, 20 years ago as a HR professional, it probably more enhanced my job fit around my values. So that's the first thing. But I think also important is that HR practitioners, I think they're uniquely positioned to act as catalysts or champions, if you like, for organizational purpose and this societal impact. And I think that's a role that's often overlooked. And I think Susanne wants to come in on this next point.
Yeah, it's about this active role of the HR practitioner. It's also linked, Olga, to your question whether they are driving this value implementation in companies. And what we learned both from our business experience and also the study shows is this top management awareness for sustainability and the sustainability orientation of the top management. So if they support initiatives for value-based organization, then it's one of the success factors. There are many studies in place about sustainable orientation of the top manager awareness, and they show this is really an active driver. And from a practice point of view, you will see it whether the HR practitioner has a place in the management team. That's so important. Yeah, if you have no active role, it's very, very difficult, and then you're more in this administrative role.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can all link as well back to John Story's model a few years ago in HRM, et cetera, in terms of the role of the HR practitioner, being involved in strategic decisions. And of course, we've moved on since then, but I think from a common good perspective, I think it's crucial to act as those drivers or championing the approach. But of course, it's going to take a values-based approach. I think it's, to our mind, this can effectively support and amplify this critical role to move towards this focus on purpose, which supports it towards what we're looking at. And of course, we're going to look at values next anyway, the next slide. But I think on reflection, as I've spoken to HR practitioners, professionals in Ireland and in the UK, originally from the UK, working in Ireland, but there's a lack of awareness of the approach at the moment. And of course, this is why we're having these talks. This is why we're having, the conference every year and everything else. And so hopefully they become more awareness of it. But as an approach, certainly to those I've spoken to, they're not aware of it. So, but again, it's still a new approach, obviously, and it's evolving. Okay, so the next question then that we were asked to look at is why values, why they're important for HR practitioners. I think this was a bit of an easier question to answer for us, I think. But the main thing that we spoke about is, well, why? Well, of course, it's a foundation, isn't it, for guiding sustainable behaviour in terms of things like ethical decision-making, employee relationships. So it's the foundation. Values drive behaviour, of course, decision-making, ways of thinking, etc. But more importantly, as we've seen through many studies on values, those that are values sort of based or values sort of focused, there's high levels of performance and business success, or profits, in other words. So maybe I shouldn't use the word profits, but it's important for employee performance, innovation and business success. And I know Susanne wants to come in on this point.
Yeah, because I know it from my past experience that the manager asked what's in it for me if I focus on the value-based organization. And there is a brilliant meta-analysis of Hartnell in the Journal of Applied Psychology in 2019. And they are using this framework from Quinn and Cameron, you might know. And they show that the values that they, in their model, that they have an impact on the operational excellence. So on the profit, on the employee satisfaction, on the customer satisfaction, and so on, and on the innovation. And that's one of the highlights, I would say, that there is really a proven impact. So it's about the why, but what about the what? So Olga, you said profit is a value. For me, profit is not the normative level of a management level. It's more the strategic guidance, yeah, the vision, the strategy, the mission statement. The normative one is what we are talking today. What kind of values? Yeah, and then the big question comes after about the transformation of values. So to how to organize and implement a value-based organization, and that's the next easy talk, I think. Yeah, because it's so huge question how to implement values in an organization, and there I think the bottom-up approach comes in. But I think, well, Jason, you will stress that more. What kind of values are so important for a value-based organization, right?
Yeah, that's going to be our next slide, of course, in terms of arguing for a common good approach, looking at what's already happened and what we think should be coming next. Sorry, Susanne.
Yeah, no. One hint I think is important, because from the research we know that the fit between the team and the supervisor in value congruence, that we have share the same values, and the fit between the individual and the manager is so important. And that's give us a hint that the manager role, so the leadership style, is really important, and it's one of the major success factors. And I'm a little bit familiar with the green HRM research, and they are having done a lot of studies between green values of the supervisor, the team, and the person or individual. Yeah, and that could be also a guidance if we want to implement values. What is most important?
Yeah, good point, Susanne.
Thank you.
It's good that you're keeping us grounded with the research as well. So, which is obviously important around evidence, but I think overall our key message though for this question is, by prioritizing values, HR practitioners therefore can foster workplaces that hopefully are productive, profitable, ethical, inclusive and meaningful for employees and society as well. So that's what we're trying to say really. But the next question then, which came up,
Jason, just a very, very quick, because Susanne mentioned about different values, and I think it's a very valid point what you mentioned here about there are different set of values, and we do know that our basis for some of them are, like we suggest, profit orientation is a value too. So, and if the manager has a priority, and this is about a second term what you have introduced, prioritizing values. So there are values on profit maximization, which we all have. I mean, all organizations have, but the prioritization of these values over something, it's the interesting angle. I think it's Susanne, you demonstrated this very nicely in terms of the studies, but I don't think, Jason, that this part it's really much explored because of the HR decision making. So because there are different situations where the prioritization as such is difficult to make, or to do. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Of course, we're going to look actually at prioritizing values on the next slide anyway. So
excellent. Very good. Well done.
So we picked up on that point. But just moving on to the third question that came up was how practically then can values be embedded towards a common good approach? And so far with the research, there's been a couple of ideas. The first one is to reframe the current inside-out focus HR practices to make them more sort of common good focused. But in terms of prioritizing values, we see some research in the common good area, especially from Jarlstrom there, that we should be embedding common good values. Things like dignity and solidarity, for example, have been suggested. And I think there are about 6 values that they mentioned there that could help towards common good goals. But what myself and Susanne et al. Are saying that we believe that we should build on these initial values that have been suggested and prioritize, if you like, broader relational type, holistic type values, where so the view of the person or employees recognizes their more inner dimension. And so why is this? Why do we think that values need to be much more broader as a priority or focus on the inner dimension, relational, holistic? Is because sustainability issues, of course, as we know, stems from one of the things that stems from disconnection to people, to themselves, to others, and to nature as well. And so there is some good research on this. And so our argument is that a much more broader relational, holistic approach could assist HR practices rebuild these sustainable connections to achieve common good goals, but ultimately with our framework to also support the recently subscribed IDGs, the inner development goals, and ultimately the SDGs. So that's what we're looking at with our framework, as we'll show in a second. So this requires an integrative approach to do this. And what we think is that workplace spirituality, the values framework that's used, and there's 10 values. So for example, humanism, benevolence, and responsibility. So there's 3 of them. Humanism basically suggests that practices and policies, they should set the essential dignity and worth of each employee, but also worth includes opportunities and things like personal growth as well. But also beyond workplace spirituality values framework as well, we also believe that we can integrate contemplative practices too within HR practices, especially within the intervention, to make them more holistic. So so that's what we're going to advocate in a second with the framework. But there already is connections between sustainability and workplace spirituality, for example. And for example, so sustainable HRM is positively related to workplace spirituality. And more recently, Gomez in 2025, they found the relationship between sustainable HRM and organizational citizenship behavior was mediated by full mediation by workplace spirituality, which is quite interesting. So that's just one of a number of studies that are connecting workplace spirituality with a common good, with a sustainable type approach. So that's a little bit on how practically we think it should be broader values. Let's have a look first of all as to what we're talking about when we say workplace spirituality. And you can see some of the values here that we think should be prioritized. So what is it first? Well, it's workplace spirituality is defined in many ways, but here you can see it's a framework of values, evidence in the culture that promote employees' experience of transcendence. This means going beyond sort of our sense of me, or I, to consider others, if you like, through the work process. Facilitating sense of being connected to others in a way that provides feelings of completeness and joy. And what you see here are some of the key dimensions or key features. And on the top left, you can see the values that we're talking about. There's 10 of them. And what we're saying is that these should be prioritized. They're all interesting because they're all unique, and they're all future thinking, all based on sort of personal growth, kindness, for example, compassion, even justice is there as well. So they're all quite interesting. But we also have, you can see dimensions such as meaningful and purposeful work as well. And quite interestingly, Lu 2024, they found that Common Good HRM practices contributed to meaningful work and thriving, would you believe? So again, we have a commonality or a synergy between workplace spirituality and common good research that's already happened. And also talking about spirituality, we have FAM as well in 2023. They found a relationship between common good HRM and employee ethical behavior was significantly stronger when combined with higher levels of spiritual leadership. So it's another area that we think is important within this field. But Susanne wants to come in, I think, about the sense of community and connectedness on the top right.
Yeah. In the preparation period, we had a debate on that at table, because I thought many of the values are in line with the individual needs, and then I just thought about organizational values. And Brian, thank you for posting the common good values. So they are more on the organizational level, and common good, it's a mixture of it. But if you talk about the right square on the right hand, sense of community and connectedness. So being part of a team, being part of an organization. This is for some people very important, and it's beyond the individual focus. Yeah, and Jason and I, we are coming from the social psychology and from our studies, and we thought about how to get the people aligned with values, and there the sense of community, being part of an organization is really important. But if you have studied social psychology, it's something positive, but it could be also something negative. Because in line with the social identity theory, you get a little bit de-individualized in a team. So you're not the individual anymore with your individual demands for growth and mindfulness and your balance for yourself. So this could be a risk for an organization. So also, again, Olga, how to prioritize these values, yeah? For sure, some are important for growth and well-being and so on, yeah, to work very long in a company. But on the other hand, you're a part of this organization, and we know from human research that you stay in a company if you have this collective self with the organization. This is also a very interesting point, positive and negative, yeah. This we want to just keep in mind if you talk about value-based organization.
Yeah, a good point, Susanne. And just moving on to the next, just to give you a bit of an idea about contemplative practice too, which is the other framework, if you like, that we're borrowing from for our overall framework we're going to show you in a minute. For those that don't know contemplative practice, there is theory behind this, but it's about creating space for reflection and holding an idea in focus. And there's lots of research on this actually that shows some good outcomes, as Susanne will talk about in a minute, about sustainability. But it's about promoting things like self-awareness, inner growth, and again, that connection to something greater than oneself comes up as well. But here are some of the practices that are quite interesting, which you've probably come across before. Things like visualization, retreats, meditation, yoga, loving kindness meditation. Those are the types of practices that are there to try to support awareness and connection. So Susanne, you want to come into on the sustainability link on this?
Yeah, we had like a debate before. So these again are very individual practices. So I think the individual, it's a great benefit for the employee in a company, but what's in it for the organizational level? Yeah, because the CEO in a company or the managing director might ask you, it's very nice if you go, Jason, to the yoga course, yeah, during your work time. But could you please think about the profit of our company and the ownership for your objectives? So this is a realistic comment. So I guess we always need to link our practices, our concepts with a business benefit. Yeah, and this is the why for the practitioner, how to convince your management, how to sell your story to the management, that it's on a long-term run, it's so important to invest in the employee with these practices, but on a but the management sometimes thinks very short-term based, and there we have a gap, yeah. And the difficulty is how to convince, because you can't send the top manager to a yoga course, yeah. So it might be very difficult if they are not very positive about that. So the big question is how to get that awareness, but for the social sustainability, this is so important. I have no answer because I guess it depends on the stakeholder management in your company, yeah, and the history, and to understand how your management is thinking. And sometimes at lunchtime or at the coffee table, you might find a good argument to convince him or her.
Yeah, thanks for that, Susanne. Again, keeping us grounded. Feet on the ground and that. So I bet you're all thinking, well, how does this all fit? How do we integrate it? How do we create that, broader, holistic relational values and prioritize them, and IDGs and SDGs, and moreover, this common good approach? So what we have then is the overarching model. I'm going to show you the example of recruit selection, how it fits on the next slide. But this is the model that we've integrated. How does it all fit? And on the left side, well, the framework itself, it reframes HR practices then towards an outside-in perspective by integrating these workplace spirituality dimensions and the values framework that we mentioned before. And also it integrates it with the contemplative practices as well, which you can see what they call values-based interventions to create this common good HR practice. So it's all integrated, but it follows a left to right sequence, treating these practices as strategically designed to ensure the workforce contributes effectively to common good goals. So the workplace spirituality dimensions, if you like, they act as a context or theme that drives the practice or policy intervention. And they also represent key aspects of employees' spiritual experience as well, if you want to call it that, in organizations. So they align with common good HR practices and the values-based interventions, and they serve basically as building blocks. The values-based intervention then, as we'll see as an example in a minute, are values-based, and they can be integrated too, if need be, by these contemplative practices. Not all of them are, but some of them are. And finally, the values-based intervention is aligned with the IDG, the Inner Development Goals, which have been subscribed to help to try to support the SDGs. And these IDGs then help to support the UN SDGs by focusing on individuals' personal and inner development. So it's a bit of a mouthful there, but there is a synergy between them. And what we're trying to do with this is try to create this inner outer transformation. That's the focus. So again, remember that disconnection. It's about reconnecting in order to basically connect with the common good goals. So how does it all fit? Well, let's look at an example of recruit selection. I'm going to show you the next slide, which is part of the framework. So it's a bit noisy, but I'm just going to show you the from a practitioner perspective how it works, and hopefully you'll see the recruit selection in the blue. So on the left-hand side, you have the HR practices, which are now common good. And we also have more as well on this page. I'm not going to go through all of them, but if anybody wants to get a copy of this, we're more than happy to share it. So ultimately at the top there, you've got the strategic side of things, vision, mission, values. And of course, you've got the strategy for people culture, and this is where you obviously prioritize values, we spoke about before. But with the recruit selection, you can see that the main theme behind this is meaningful, purposeful work, which relates to the workplace spirituality dimension mentioned earlier. In terms of a values-based intervention, here we're prioritizing humanism and benevolence around compassion and kindness and dignity to create what we call, as a practitioner, purpose and values-based recruit selection. This is not new, by the way, because it's obviously used in places like the NHS in the UK, but we're looking at developing or looking at competencies such as recruiting for compassion, gratitude, or benevolence, which is to do with kindness. So how does this then support the IDGs? Well, it basically supports them because one of the competencies of IDGs is relating to others and caring for others in the world. And the examples would you believe they use are things like compassion and gratitude. So they're the linkage to the IDG. And so in terms of outer SDG outputs, what we're saying here is that it's SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. Employees could become more abundant through job satisfaction, etc., which could then lead to SDG 1, no poverty. So again, that's just a broader point, but we're both still working on these SDGs or outer inputs because, of course, there is a challenge around that, trying to connect. But so this is really more of a work in progress or developmental at the moment for those on the right side. If we look at learning and development at the bottom, you can see the theme is inner life growth and development from workplace spirituality. But we do see an intervention from the contemplative practice around things like deep listening or communication with mindfulness, and again, there could be interventions such as compassionate leadership training or spiritual leadership training around the theme of humanism, or what we call integrity. This links then to the IDG of competence of being in relationship to self. And of course, the examples they give are things like inner compass, self-awareness, presence, integrity, and authenticity. So it maps pretty well that intervention to the IDG. And therefore, we also talk about SDG 4, which is education, awareness of oneself and the greater world, if you like. So that's SDG 4. So that's a quick whistle-stop tour of that particular idea. I hope that makes sense of how it's integrated. Do you have any questions at all, Susanne, at this stage? You've got loads,
yeah. We talked about that recruiting and selection is also very important for leaders. If we want to hire leaders from internally or externally, that we keep values in mind and not only the history and the qualification and so on. And this leads me to the comment of Brian that how to get the openness of the manager for the common good approach, for purposeful organization. So the easiest way is to say, yeah, we have it already. But we have many companies where the managers prioritize the values with a profit maximization. Yeah, and therefore I think if you talk with them from a practitioner perspective of long-term business models, and they talk about risk management, in their terms, you can convince them that there is a long-term advantage if you stick to a value-based organization with a sustainable orientation. And this is a long debate. Sometimes you won't be successful, but I think it's one mandate of HRM. To go this way and try to convince the stakeholders. And sometimes you need stakeholders from outside in to convince your management team. Yeah? It's like in every project, in every journey you have from the HRM perspective, but it's not a quick win. And if we talk about value-based organization, we have to be patient, and we have to find one. If you only find one of them in the management team who is convinced of a sustainable orientation of the values we debated, I think this is really the first step. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, thanks, Susanne. And just to say before we move on that we've also incorporated some of Frederic Laloux's work as well on teal-based organizations as well. So, which again is to do with a higher level of consciousness. Of course, you can see employee voice engagement is here as well, work-based democracy. So all of the common HR practices, no pun, are included here, including performance, employee health, and onboarding, job design, etc., etc. So our final slide then on this is to the bad news, if you like, of this is some reservations. And I'm now going to put my feet on the ground and just that, of course, one of the big issues, of course, is clarifying this link between HRM and the SDGs. And Brewster recently wrote a paper around this, and especially around addressing the HR's limited influence in organizations around power in terms of being able to drive this. So that's one challenge. Of course, the model that's been presented here is a normative model assuming ideal conditions in organizations, and we know it's not like that. So again, there are many questions to ask around this, but third thing is measuring impact. How do we measure impact of this? Again, a critical question. And I think coming back to the previous question about values and HR professionals and prioritizing, this demands HR professionals and senior leaders to role model BS Power's values as well. Again, so maybe that's a big ask. Maybe these moral values are a bit too far, I don't know. So again, that's been another critique which has been spoken about recently in the research literature. So any points on this, Susanne, especially geopolitical issues at the moment?
Well, yeah, because every day, if you go to the news, you see some different news from America, from Europe, and I think we have to integrate that in our thoughts. That the world, the political world, is changing. That there is a new power play between Europe and the United States. The Green Deal from yesterday evening in the news, yeah. So they have less powerful. So they, I think, they decrease a little bit the power for the companies. So it's not mandatory. It's only mandatory in 2 years. So the companies prepared for the CSRD, and now they have a longer time to prepare. So what's going on in the outside world? Yeah, and for sure it will have an impact in terms of context and contingency on our concepts. Yeah, but then I think it depends on the management and on the employees that they stick to their values in their companies. Yeah, and keep on that journey. That would be my comment on that, because you don't know what will be tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting, isn't it, to context at the moment. And that brings us to our final question for everybody, as we're going to close the presentation, is how would you implement Common Good HRM into your organization? So we'd like to ask that, I think, as a first question, as part of the Q&A, if that's okay, Olga. How would you implement Common Good in your organization? Where would you start?
Absolutely.
I think that's the key. So I'm going to stop sharing now and put my feet back on the ground again. So thank you. Thanks, Susanne.
Thank you, Jess. Thanks, Susanne. Yeah, really interesting points. Yeah, Brian, please, yeah, exactly. Bravo. Excellent. Thank you very much.
We're on time as well, I think, aren't we?
Yeah, so if somebody would like or need to leave, it's absolutely fine. But we move on to the discussion, and like Jason and Susanne mentioned, yeah, let's have a look at how these questions can be actually. I would not say solve, but it would be interesting to see your question or not question, your solution. How do you experience this? Yeah. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you. Brian, you raised your hand first. Wasn't it? Or you?
No, I mixed it. I just want to applaud and leave. I leave
okay.
To other people. I have too much to say, and I can talk at conference.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we would really be interested in your opinion, even if you have no contact with companies.
A short one, because this question comes all the time.
But to all the members in this audience, that you are not too shy to ask any or give any comments, whether it is realistic to have a value-based organization, or what's your opinion on that? It's Brian, it's your turn, but it's also for the other participants. You should feel welcome.
Exactly. 2 minutes, and then let's. As chair, the main job for the chair is to get people talking. So I've asked Jason, I've asked last year taught me as well. Basically, I've come to the opinion is I think we have to stop. A lot of the publications that have come out, and it's a lot, over 500. Most of them are trying to say, basically, we've gone to the stage of common good from being something new, outside in, okay. But now it's actually established, say, okay, it's HR. First of all, HR is beginning to, I think, has to realize that it needs to change. It's simply not sustainable. Sustainable HRM is not even sustainable, because at the end of the day, when the situation changes, when you don't have to, up to now it's been driven by compliance, by regulation, some from the European Union, or the Biden administration in America, basically Europe and America were driving that, and then mostly Europe, and the companies had to comply. Or legitimacy. The customers in Europe wanted more green. That was the narrative the last 20 years maybe. But now it's shifting in the last 5 years, the last 10 years, but actually the last 5, and especially since this new election the last year, it has shifted. A lot of customers are saying, well, values haven't shifted, but companies have said we don't have to comply anymore. It's regulations, deregulation, and so on. So they're not complying. That's what a DEI agenda was overnight disbanded. UMV just put out a report yesterday saying, oh, we won't meet our sustainable goals. In fact, UMV in Austria, the oil company, the national oil company, they said, we're not only going to meet our goals, we're not going to even bother anymore, because it was the reason was customers had unrealistic expectations. That's the excuse. The real reason is they just don't care. They want to make more profits. So it's shifted. So what do? I think a lot of the publications have tried to offer a business argument saying, why is common good? How can common good contribute to profits, organizational, through maybe more engagement, more teamwork, more efficiency, more, and so on. But I think that's okay. We should keep doing that. That's part of the job. But I think we should move away. I think it's time now, because of the context. I think it's realistic now to say, and we shouldn't take the moral high ground. We should be based in values. But I don't think we need to keep arguing for a business case. I think it's okay to say common good is based in ethics. It's an ethical, value-based approach. And you don't have to always make profit. You can make profits, of course you ought to make profits, but not profit maximization. You can be a good business and make profits and create jobs and do good, but sometimes you can't make profit. Maximization maybe is not ethical. And at the end of the day, when you have a choice between making maximum profits or just surviving and maybe creating jobs and doing good, from a common good perspective, I mean, not from common good HRM, but basically from a Catholic social theory, from an ethical approach, you should always do the right thing. You should always do the right thing. So what is the right thing? That's the next thing you say, Susanne. We need choice. Individual people maybe say the right thing is that I have my individual choice of freedom. Other people say it's more collective. We have this debate. But I would say a common good approach is based in the common good literature. And the common good philosophical tradition says that in doubt, you always choose for the collective benefit, not the individual. The idea of the common good is society benefits, we all benefit. A neoliberal approach is saying, the neos, in Germany we've seen this, that was the major problem. They said, no, individual freedom always has to be prioritized, and that's always good for everybody, so trickle down. That did not work, especially in East Germany, because they said it's more community. The common good, not my idea, the common good philosophical approach says, when in doubt, when we have a crisis, as sustainability or democracy, when communities are having problems, and people are having problems every day, you have to make the decision based on what's good for the collective good. And we can decide what that is. You can read into philosophy, and each company can decide, they can say, what's good for the collective workers. And the idea is, it's an individual basis, but the point is, how do we know what's good for each individual, for the collective team, collective company? You ask the employees. You involve so many people as possible in the organization, and rationally, then, if you have a maximum workplace democracy, then the choice and freedom and so on, and respect and dignity, then basically the best solution for this situation, for this company, rationally, should be the right decision.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. It's absolutely valuable what you have said, and this is so this kind of sometimes you need to be aware about this kind of I would say ideal situation, right? So we definitely know that it would be good to have so that the priorities would be if we would prioritize democracy, etc., it would be a great thing. However, sometimes it's or not how it's very often different. And I would like actually to ask maybe participants with a so practitioner point. So Jana, you mentioned that you are proficient. Do you think that the value-based approach, what Jason, Susanne presented, is it really realistic to implement at practice?
It's a very difficult question to answer. I think everybody will have a different opinion. I think I'm just thinking, how do we measure that in practice? I'm actually working on a code of conduct for staff at the moment, which is values-led. And as I'm writing the drafts, I'm thinking, how do we check that this is actually working? How do we implement it in a way that all employees engage with these values on a daily basis, you know, in communications, in conversations with colleagues and students, for example. But yeah, I think it's a great idea, but in practice, I've struggled to actually envisage it being implemented easily.
But maybe this is a really interesting point. Do we have processes for in HR function which enable this kind of sort of to add the point about your slide, I think, Jason, you have prepared, we have sort of outputs, right? So the engagement, for example, but do we actually think about enablers? Yeah, for example, consultation. There are a lot of decision making which are sort of like Susanne, you mentioned over the night, the decision is taken without consultation. And do we have process in place to get those consultation organized by HR practitioners or function? So it's another value is maybe it's too many cooks for this decision, yeah, and it's faster, it's much faster. It's another value. It's not profit orientation, but this kind of time consume or sort of little time actually to think and to consult and to take different decisions. So, but do we have this enablers? Yes, Susanne.
Well, I think first of all, we can measure values, and this is very easy. You set up your employee survey, you include your common good values, and then you measure. And then you can also measure the HR efficiency, whether they support the managers and the employees. The more difficult question is how to implement. Yeah, on this collective action, so for all employees, and then you have the code of conduct. But how do the people believe in these values and how they deal in their daily operations with these values? And this, I think, is the more tricky thing. So the standard HR answer is that you include it in the performance management, in the training of the leaders, etc. Yeah, but then I think if you go to companies like Brian mentioned, these purpose companies, we have been together with Novo Nordisk yesterday, and they said this is our way how we deal with each other as a team. So diversity and inclusion is needed because we need new young people. We have this demographic change in our country, yeah, and that's why the respect, the trust in these heterogeneous teams is one of our daily value we have to implement. But then it's a huge leadership task, yeah. So that the leader has to be open for these values, and on a daily basis, you have to remind, you have to be a role model, etc.
Thank you, Susanne. Any sort of comments to answer maybe Jana's question? It's actually really interesting. How do we measure this values because for me measurement, because I worked actually on competency framework and conduct for UNIDO. It's in Vienna, a UN organization, and I also developed a nice framework together, of course, with some colleagues, a nice framework for employees and for managers. We did have different competencies and conduct. It's so interesting. And it was also very difficult to measure how these values actually were embedded in their practice. And the most difficult actually value was integrity and professionalism, because they did not actually very much understood what does mean actually integrity. And one of the measure was on number of accidents, how the money from UNIDO was spent outside the UNIDO for projects. For example, some money was spent on houses for project managers. How integrative is the decision was. And this is what I also feel the question is, can this link of measuring decision making can be integrated? If this mechanism is there, then yes. Otherwise, the frameworks will be standing alone without any really proper integration. So this is there. And yeah, as you know, for the EU, there are a lot of decisions made recently where we just think, my God, yeah, there are so many consequences and things. I think Jason also mentioned at the beginning, Jason, about consequences. So how this decision is made and what are the consequences from it. And this is also, for me, impact and measurement. Yeah. Any other thoughts, maybe? Yeah, Susanne? Or Susanne? Yeah, Luisa, yeah, please go on. Yeah.
Susanne, go ahead, maybe you first. I hear you, Susanne.
No, you are first.
Okay, all right. There are two things that I wanted to say, actually. I think that since now we have HR analytics, I think the situation has improved for HR, because I remember that in the past, when I was trying to start a conversation about values, etc., the CTO and CEO, they always were telling me, show us the numbers. We just need the numbers. So, and now that we have HR analytics, it's a little bit easier, because we can have a survey, we can maybe run independent focus groups, etc. So, and measure it somehow. I think it's better in that sense. It's positive. But on the other hand, I would like to say that what I see as from a practitioner's perspective is that those values that today Jason and Susanne talked about at the top management level, sometimes they seen as weaknesses, because I remember when I was working as a business development manager for an HR tech company, and we needed to employ an HR director. And because I had experience in HR, they asked me to draft the job description. And the CEO told me, well, again, I wrote about the values. So, and he was saying to me, Luisa, we need a shark. We need to find a shark, because we have 12 offices in 12 countries. So we need to find like a really resilient and strong type of a pushy person who can just organize and boss everybody around, and everybody would listen to them. So and I think, yes, there is maybe a contradiction when we talk about top management and talk about the values that we think are important, like kindness and compassion.
Good point, Liz. I think, Susanne, do you want to come in, or Luke? You put also a very interesting idea here. If you would like maybe to expand on the environmental aspect or metrics, what environmental social governance metrics, how this can be used.
Hi, Olga.
Hi, Luke.
How are you doing? I suppose I don't know a whole lot of this because I'm coming at it from an accounting perspective. I'm a colleague of Jason's and work in the accounting field, but it is one of the growing fields for us is struggling with the environmental, social, and governance reporting, and there's quite a few new standards being developed, and they're looking at the same type of issues in terms. It is common good. And if I was trying to find a way in to try and implement this or get buy-in from senior management, would be to try and say, okay, well, this is from the HR's perspective, one way of looking at HR issues from an ESG perspective is this common good approach. Now, and I can't think of any specific ones I'd be able to highlight now, but if I was to think about it, that's one way I would go about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, thank you, Luke. Yeah, it's definitely there are a lot of frameworks to which can be or are developed, and I'm also sort of realizing now, so because I'm also responsible for some optimizing also for some module developments, and we are dealing with skills. It's not about values, but also skills. There are so many frameworks, my God, and how you can squeeze all this into your work. It's very, very difficult. But Brian, yeah, if you
just short 2 points, because I be very careful not to dominate narratives as I tend to. Yeah, I think what Luke was very important. The ESGs, Olga, have other colours again. The ESGs are going to be the way to go forward in Europe, and not in America, because in Europe we have these new standards, but in other countries are pushed back. And in globally, saying the ESGs probably going to be just standardized in Europe and not anywhere else. And I'm worried that'll be a pushback, because we have multinational companies and they might adopt them just for these accountants' sustainable practices in Europe because they have to. But elsewhere, where they do the most damage in developing countries, and it's mostly lack of sustainability, and where we need to have impact, they will simply ignore them. So the ESGs would be ideally, as I say, morally, ideally the perfect way to do it, sustainable reporting. But we know even with the normal sustainable reporting, they haven't worked. People have greenwashing is the main problem. But what you did make one point was very useful and very interesting. I think it's a way forward. Where do managers get their? Most managers are not HR people. Most management come from finance or business schools, American business schools. They are not HR people. So I think it's very important to say HR is to do with human. And if we're talking about sustainability in terms of human development, the common good is about human flourishing. Okay, it's ecology is in there. We do have green ecology in there, but basically we're saying is the way to ecological transformation is human changing the behavior and human flourishing and human dignity relations. So we're talking about a human. The HR. That's what if the HR says we adopt. There is this new common good approach. We like it. It's a value-based approach, and we. If a HR manager says, I would like to implement this, or say, this is an alternative, have a look at it. If you don't want to be sustainable, if you want to have a green approach or an organizational behavioral approach, you can do that. Or you just want an accountancy approach, just basically based on reporting, you can do that. But if you want to have real change, maybe a value-based approach, a relational approach is the way to go. You can just argue. So I think HR, if they adopt the common good, and say, well, this is another alternative framework, that might be enough in certain organizations that are open to it. If organizations are not really open to it and just want to do greenwashing or do limited, sort of like just do what they have to do, they probably won't adopt a common good approach because it's more value-based. But at least if HR says there is this approach, it comes from academia, it comes from not business schools, it comes from HR, and I've trained in this, and then if this is someone who's trained in HR, then they might be able to influence the debate. Having said that, most managers, boards are not HR. People that are in there, they tend to be, because we tend to be human-centric, tends to be seen as weakness. The strong people tend to be the organizational people, the strategists, and the finance people. You have to realize that. But actually offering it. And the second point, a quick point, then let's just end it. I just reviewed the paper. I don't know if someone's there or not. I just reviewed a paper yesterday on the role of HRA in sustainability. and it's great. And they argued that the problem why organizations are not sustainable is a lack of time and resources from HRM. And they argued the best way of doing that is to use HRA, I think Janice said that, is to use analytics in all processes in HR, and we will save time. We can do individual processes, and we'll save time and resources, and then we become more sustainable. I critiqued it a little bit, a minor review. I recommended a minor review. I said I like the paper, it has opportunities, but it downplays the problem that analytics, just efficiency and timing. The problem is not just time and resources alone. HR does have a lack of time and resources. Maybe analytics can solve this. The problem is if you have the time and resources, you also have to have purpose. You also have to have this idea that we want to become sustainable. So it has to be values. If the values are missing, HRA won't solve the problem of sustainability. If the values are there and then HRA can be used as a tool, then we really have a solution for the future. So I think a value-based framework, putting it in the room, HRA is dominating everything. It needs to be balanced with some sort of values framework, which I think we have one on offer today. So I think find this balance is the right way of doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I think it's I have thought it's a really interesting discussion. I think it's also was good, Jason, Susanne, to put those questions. I have posted them once more time just to check. Yeah, Susanne, yeah, please go on.
I just want to comment on Luke and Brian, because I think it's the European, the ESSR, so this systematic reporting system with the ESG. So this is how the management students are educated now in accounting. And this is a good driver for the companies, because they have this environmental, the social, and the governance dimensions, and they have listed certain sub-goals and also KPIs. And I like the idea of Luisa. So if you have analytics in place and if you specify the KPIs and link it to the Common Good approach, because it's about the workforce, it's about the customer and the society, it's an outside-in approach. Yeah, you can use this reporting or this framework to get the buy-in of the managers. And we have translated our system for the Common Good. It's also the social dimension, and a student assistant really linked it with the sustainable goals. Yeah, and once we've translated that, we can also multiply it in this network, because it's so important that we speak the language of the management. Yeah, that we understand what is these numbers saying in this reporting system, and then we are in line with them, and then we can show we have a benefit for the management team. And that's the way how we convince the management team that we use their system. So look, this was a fantastic comment. Thank you.
Yeah, I like the idea of Jason, Common Good reporting. Good. No, excellent. Any other comments? Because what I also would like to add, what most probably relates to this normative framework and as a part of the ideal situation, what is really missing, and Susanne, you mentioned here about knowing what the management think, because there is a power discrepancy, because they do have I mean, not they, but the management does a lot of power, and how this kind of powers can be brought in balance by providing evidence, providing impact. So this kind of element is definitely can be explored in order to promote common good values as well. All right. Yeah. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, everybody. Anybody else? Or so I suggest that we are closing this session. We're also to or somebody would like to add something, Bernard, or something. What you?
Just a quick comment to. Thank you. Brilliant. Great session. Really great. Keep going with the easy talks. Really going very well. Just a quick session. I know I've been annoying everybody, but maybe someone there hasn't registered yet for the conference. We have probably, I think, 2 weeks' time or something. Please register for the conference, that we know how many people are coming. We can do that. There are lots of different sessions covering really everything here we've discussed today. We have 10 sessions, 3 discussion groups over 2 days. So do register now for the conference if you haven't already. It's certainly worth it. See you there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a great discussion, and thank you, Jason and Susanne, for your contribution, and very interesting game of cop, bad and good cop. Yeah, it was also very informative and provocative discussion, so raising a lot of questions which we can also continue to discuss next time. I think my takeaway is it's literally how these can be implemented practically, or how common good can be implemented practically. I'm also thinking about this kind of prioritization, how people can what are the mechanisms of prioritization. And Jana, thank you for your comment about really how this can be measured and the particular impact, which is quite important to demonstrate that this concept is viable. Yeah, and this is an interesting point which we can discuss next time. Yeah. So thank you very much, and yeah, I hope we stay in touch then. Exactly.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great session.